Remember that with most of our basic market structures, firms can make their decisions independently of any rivals. In perfect competition and in monopolistic competition, it's because each firm is so small that its actions don't affect anyone else, and in monopoly, it's because there are no rivals. But you may recall that our most complicated market structure, oligopoly, is made so because there are only a handful of firms, and each firm has a large enough share of the market that any single firm's activities have an effect on all of the rival firms. In this type of market structure, strategies need to be in place in terms of a firm's actions and its reactions to the activities of other firms. Modeling this strategic behavior, using the mutual interdependence among firms and the expected behavior of the other firms, leads us to the topic of game theory. Investopedia.com defines game theory as the process of modeling strategic interaction between two or more players in a situation containing set rules and outcomes. While no doubt accurate, I find that I much prefer the plain English definition from Cracked.com, 5 Easy Ways to Understand Game Theory, which says, game theory is a study of how to choose the best move and to get the most stuff when others are trying to take it. Notice that neither definition says that the economic players have to be producers, although we will, for the most part, be considering the strategic interactions among firms, each with the goal of maximizing profit. We could also consider strategic interaction in any situation where each player is trying to maximize his or her own well-being. As we've seen in past videos, sometimes it's easier to look at players maximizing their own utility before examining firms who are maximizing profit. The classic fundamental model in game theory is the prisoner's dilemma. In this model, two individuals, I'll call them Sam and Dean, have been caught for a relatively low-level crime of credit card fraud, but they're suspected of being partners in a string of murders. The proof exists to convict them for the lesser crime of fraud, but there's no solid proof of involvement in the greater crime of murder. The only way they can be convicted of the larger crime is if the police can get an actual confession. No confession, no conviction. The police know better than to interview the suspects together. Instead, Sam and Dean are taken to separate rooms where neither can communicate with the other. Each suspect knows the following. If neither of them confesses, each receives 3 years for credit card fraud. If both confess, each receives 5 years for their crimes. If one confesses and the other does not, the confessor receives a lighter sentence of only 6 months, while the accomplice will serve 10 years. So each prisoner now needs to decide, confess or deny the crime. To model the decision, game theory uses what's referred to as a payoff matrix, which is a chart illustrating all possible combinations of decisions as well as the outcomes of those decisions. So let's think about the choices, starting with Sam. From Sam's viewpoint, if Dean were to confess, Sam would be better off to confess as well, getting 5 years rather than 10 years in prison. If Dean does not confess, Sam would be better off confessing because he would get 6 months rather than 3 years. This means that regardless of the choice that Dean makes, Sam is better off to confess. When there's a clearly superior strategy, regardless of the rival's decision, this is referred to as the dominant strategy. Now look at the decision from Dean's point of view. If Sam were to confess, Dean would be better off to confess as well, getting 5 years rather than 10 years. If Sam does not confess, Dean would be better off to confess because he would get only 6 months rather than 3 years. Dean's dominant strategy, then, is also to confess. As a side note, it is not always the case that there's a clear dominant strategy. There could be what is referred to as a weakly dominant strategy, in which your chosen strategy isn't always going to yield a better payoff, but will never provide a lower payoff. That is, some of the time you'll get a better payoff, and other times you get an equal payoff. It is also possible that there could be an intransitive strategy, where one strategy has a better payoff in one circumstance, but in a different circumstance, a different strategy would yield a better result. Think rock, paper, scissors, where your best strategy is different with each of your opponent's moves. If Sam and Dean are playing rock, paper, scissors, the payoff matrix would look like this. As you can see in the matrix, there's no one consistent winning strategy, that is, no dominant strategy, nor even a consistent win-draw or weakly dominant strategy. But for our purposes, I'm only going to use examples with clearly dominant strategies, like the given prisoner's dilemma. The end result of isolating each prisoner and forcing an independent decision based on the rival's potential actions will be that both prisoners will confess, resulting in a 5-year sentence for each, even though they could have had lower sentences if they had both denied the crime, which they assuredly would have if they could have made the decision together. What does the prisoner's dilemma have to do with firms' behavior? Well, the same payoff matrix model can be used with two profit-maximizing firms where the strategies, rather than confess or deny a crime, could be where to locate the business or whether to pay for a marketing campaign or how much to produce, just to name a few. Let's consider the marketing option, for example. What if your two companies, Monkey Biz and Monkeys R Us, are rivals? Each company is trying to decide whether to invest money into advertising or not. If no one advertises, this is the bottom right of this payoff matrix, each firm earns $25,000. If both firms advertise, the top left of the payoff matrix, the cost of advertising eats profits without increasing market share for either firm, so each firm's earnings drop to $15,000. If one firm advertises while the other does not, then the firm that chooses to advertise gains market share and earnings jump to $50,000, while the non-advertising rival now loses $5,000. What will be the outcome if the decision to advertise is made by each firm in isolation? Let's start with Monkey Biz. If Monkeys R Us advertises, Monkey Biz is better off to advertise as well, earning $15,000 rather than losing $5,000. If Monkeys R Us does not advertise, Monkey Biz is still better off to advertise because it would earn $50,000 rather than just $25,000. The dominant strategy for Monkey Biz then is to advertise. Similarly, we'll find that the dominant strategy for Monkeys R Us is also to advertise. In the end, then, both firms choose to advertise if they make the decision independently of one another, in spite of the fact that both could have been made better off if neither advertised. Next time, well, let me know what you need. I'm still taking requests.